She thought she could humiliate me by mocking my suit, calling me a waiter in front of everyone. The room laughed at me, but they didn't know the next laugh would erase her name forever. Subscribe now, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments, because you're about to hear a story that flips everything upside down. The gala was held in one of those places you only see in glossy magazines. Vaulted ceilings dripping with chandeliers, marble floors polished until they mirrored every footstep, waiters carrying trays of champagne like it was water. My wife, Claire, glowed as if she were the hostess instead of just another guest. She loved these nights, the lights, the whispers, the photographs. To her, this wasn't just a party. It was a stage, and she was always performing. I had worn my only decent suit. Dark gray, clean, pressed, nothing fancy. It wasn't Armani or tailored on Fifth Avenue. It was just mine. A gift from my late father, bought years ago with money he didn't really have, but worn with pride. To me, it carried weight. To Claire, it was a target. She strutted beside me in her glittering gown, every sequin designed to catch the light, every step calculated to draw eyes. I walked silently, knowing exactly what kind of night it was going to be. The hall buzzed with power. Executives, politicians, people whose names carried stock prices with them. Music swelled from a live orchestra in the corner. Crystal glasses clinked, and laughter rose and fell like waves. I didn't belong, not in their eyes, and certainly not in Claire's. She reminded me of that every chance she got. I stayed near her, sipping carefully, my mind a calm sea even while she sought the storm. Dinner was served at long tables, polished wood lined with gold-trimmed plates. I sat beside Claire, listening as she spun stories to whoever would listen, leaning close to the CEO's wife, complimenting her jewelry, laughing too hard at bland jokes. She wanted the world to see her as one of them. To me, she was transparent. Every smile, every flutter of lashes, every nod was just a currency she was desperate to spend. It happened suddenly, almost like she had rehearsed it. A lull in the conversation, a moment when the room's attention leaned our way. Claire glanced at me, her lips curving into that smile, not of affection, but of calculation. She touched my sleeve, ran her fingers across the fabric, and then said it, loud enough for the table to hear. "Doesn't he look like one of the waiters tonight?" The words dropped like ice into the warm glow of the evening. For a second, silence, then laughter. Real laughter, cruel laughter. Heads turned, people chuckled. Even the orchestra seemed to falter on a note. Claire basked in it, her smile widening as she leaned back, eyes shining with triumph. "I told him not to wear that cheap thing," she added, twisting the knife. I sat still. No flush of anger, no protest. I lowered my gaze to my glass, turned it slightly in my hand, watching the liquid catch the light. My face gave her nothing, but inside, the silence grew heavy, colder, sharper. Guests kept laughing, some politely, some cruelly, all of them waiting to see me react. And when I didn't, when I just sat there with the same quiet calm, the weight of it unsettled even them. Claire thought she had won that night. She thought she had buried me under ridicule. What she didn't see, what none of them saw, was that the ground beneath her had already begun to shift. The laughter at that table carried across the hall, spreading like a ripple. Guests from nearby tables leaned in, curious, whispering. Claire had timed it perfectly, or so she thought. This was her performance, and I was meant to be the punchline. She raised her glass, eyes glittering under the chandeliers, and added with a smirk, "At least if they run out of servers, I've brought my own." The crowd erupted again. Forks clinked against plates, heads tilted back with shallow amusement. But beneath it all, I noticed something. Not everyone laughed. Some shifted uncomfortably, their smiles fading quickly, unsure whether they should join the cruelty or remain silent. Claire didn't see that hesitation. She was too blinded by her own vanity. I remained still, my fork poised above my plate, the same calm expression on my face as before. Every laugh that echoed around me only deepened my stillness. I could feel Claire's satisfaction growing, mistaking my silence for defeat. She thought I was too humiliated to speak, too weak to fight back. But humiliation is a strange thing. It can break you, or it can harden into something sharper than steel. And that night, I chose steel. The table shifted back into chatter, people talking about markets, politics, vacations abroad. Claire was in her element again, tossing out compliments and clever remarks, positioning herself beside the right people, leaning forward with that bright, artificial laugh. But every so often, she glanced at me, expecting to see the cracks forming, waiting for me to fumble, to lower my head in shame. What she saw instead was a steady gaze, my knife cutting cleanly into the meat on my plate, my posture unshaken. That calmness unnerved her more than any argument would have. The music swelled again, the orchestra filling the air with strings that glittered like the lights above. Waiters glided between tables, pouring wine, clearing plates, their uniforms crisp black and white. And in a cruel twist of irony, one of them brushed past me, and Claire chuckled loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "Careful," she said mockingly. "You'll confuse him with my husband." Another round of shallow laughter followed, though weaker this time, as if the joke had already begun to sour. I lifted my glass, took a slow sip, and let my eyes wander across the hall. Faces, gowns, tuxedos, the flash of a camera from the corner. But my attention landed on the stage at the far end, where the CEO's family sat. His wife, poised and elegant, her presence commanding without a word. And beside her, their daughter, Anna. She was younger than most at the gala, maybe late 20s, dressed in a simple but stunning emerald gown that shimmered beneath the lights. Unlike the others, she wasn't laughing. Her eyes were fixed on me, not with pity, not with amusement, but with something else, something sharper, more deliberate. Claire kept performing, unaware of the gaze from the stage. She leaned closer to her friends, whispering things I couldn't hear but could easily guess. More barbs, more attempts to belittle me, to cement herself as superior. I let her talk, let her laugh, let her think she was winning. Because winning in her world meant shallow smiles and fleeting approval. My world was built on something far stronger, though she had long forgotten that. As dessert was served, a hush began to fall over the hall. The orchestra shifted to a softer melody, and the CEO himself stood, tall and commanding, to thank everyone for attending. His words were measured, filled with the practiced tone of a man who knew how to hold a room. Guests raised their glasses in respect, and Claire straightened her posture, her face glowing at the chance to be seen close to power. She placed her hand over mine for a brief second, not out of affection, but for optics. To her, I was a prop again, something to complete the picture. But then came the moment she could never have anticipated. As the applause died down, Anna rose from her seat beside her parents. All eyes turned toward her, the daughter of the most powerful man in the room. She didn't rush. She stepped onto the stage with grace, her emerald gown flowing like water, her chin lifted. The chatter dimmed until silence filled the space, broken only by the faint hum of the orchestra behind her. Claire leaned forward, eager, whispering to her friends, "Watch this. She always has something charming to say." Anna looked across the room, her eyes scanning faces until they landed squarely on mine. For a heartbeat, the entire gala seemed to freeze. Then her voice rang out, clear and confident. "Tonight, I've heard a lot of talk about appearances," she began, her gaze briefly flicking toward the table where Claire sat. "But I believe a person's worth isn't in the fabric they wear. It's in the strength they carry." She paused, her words heavy in the silence. "And I am proud to stand beside someone who understands that." Whispers erupted across the hall. Claire shifted in her chair, her smirk fading into confusion. I stayed still, my heart steady, my face calm. Anna stepped down from the stage, her heels clicking softly against the marble floor as she crossed the hall, every eye following her. And when she reached our table, she didn't hesitate. She extended her hand toward me, her expression unwavering, and said, "This is the man I choose, not for his suit but for his soul. He is worthy of more than clothes. He is worthy of a throne." Gasps filled the room, followed by applause that started in the back and swelled like a wave. Guests rose to their feet, clapping, cheering, some in disbelief, others in awe. Claire sat frozen, her face drained of color, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Her hand slipped from mine as Anna slid her arm through mine and lifted her chin proudly. The hall roared with approval, and the very stage Claire had tried to build for herself collapsed beneath her. I didn't look at her. I didn't need to. The silence between us said more than words ever could. And as the applause thundered on, Claire finally realized that the joke she had told at my expense had become the punchline of her own downfall. The sound of applause thundered around me, echoing off the high ceilings, shaking the very air in the hall. For a moment, it felt like the walls themselves were vibrating with the force of it. People were rising from their chairs, their claps sharp and rhythmic, some whistling, others murmuring in astonishment. I stood frozen, not because I didn't know what to do, but because silence had become my shield, my weapon, and my language. Anna stood beside me, her arm linked through mine with unshakable grace, her emerald gown shimmering under the light like a banner of victory. Her chin was lifted, her eyes bright, and her confidence wrapped itself around me like armor. Claire, on the other hand, had turned to stone. Her face, moments ago animated with smug laughter, was now pale and stiff, her painted lips parted but unable to form words. The mockery she had staged so carefully had been ripped from her hands, turned into something she couldn't control. Her fingers still rested near her champagne flute, but they trembled so visibly that the glass rattled against the table. Her friends, who had been her audience and allies minutes earlier, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, caught between joining the celebration and clinging to her sinking ship. The CEO himself rose, his expression unreadable at first. He was a man known for his commanding presence, someone whose approval could make or break entire careers. The room hushed instantly as he stepped forward, and the orchestra ceased their playing altogether. The silence now wasn't empty. It was electric, waiting for his verdict. His gaze swept the hall before landing squarely on me and Anna. For a moment, I braced myself, wondering if her bold declaration would draw rebuke or ridicule. But then, his stern face softened, and he nodded slowly, firmly. "My daughter speaks with conviction," he said, his voice booming with authority. "And conviction is something I have always respected. Tonight, she has chosen to honor a man for his strength, not his status. That is a choice worthy of applause." His words rolled through the hall like thunder, and instantly the applause surged again, louder than before, accompanied by cheers and even standing ovations from tables that had moments earlier been laughing at me. Claire's face crumpled. She turned to the guests nearest her, searching desperately for support, but they avoided her eyes, some raising their glasses toward me, others applauding with newfound enthusiasm as though they had never laughed at all. One of her closest friends muttered something about needing the restroom and slipped away, leaving her isolated. Claire's shoulders hunched as if the very weight of the chandelier light had fallen on her. Anna squeezed my arm gently, a signal of reassurance, and guided me forward toward the center of the hall. The guests parted as though we were royalty walking through, their whispers chasing us like shadows. "Who is he? Did you know? Incredible. She chose him." Their voices rose and fell, but every word carried the same tone of awe. I walked in silence, my every step measured, my every breath steady. Inside, there was no rush of triumph, only the cold clarity of justice. Claire had wanted to make me invisible, but now she was the one fading into the background. When we reached the center, Anna raised her hand slightly, calling for quiet. The guests hushed again, eager, curious, hanging on her every word. She looked around, her eyes sharp, her presence commanding in a way that even her father couldn't overshadow. "For too long," she said, "people have judged worth by appearance, by wealth, by things that can be bought or borrowed. But real worth is proven in silence, in dignity, in strength that doesn't need to announce itself. Tonight, I choose to honor that strength." Her words sliced through the hall, sharp and unrelenting. All the guests turned their eyes toward me again, and I felt the weight of their stares. But this time it wasn't mockery. It wasn't pity. It was recognition. For the first time that evening, I wasn't the butt of a cruel joke or the shadow at my wife's side. I was the man standing in the light, not because I demanded it, but because someone had chosen to shine it on me. Claire tried once more, her voice rising from the corner of the table. "This is absurd," she cried, her words shrill, breaking under the strain. "You don't know him, Anna. He's nothing. Just nothing in a borrowed suit." But the words fell flat, drowned out by the applause that rose again almost instantly, drowning her voice like waves crushing a desperate cry. People clapped louder, some even stamping their feet, determined to silence her cruelty with celebration. Her face burned red as she slumped back into her chair, her chest heaving, her eyes wild with panic. She turned to me, desperation cutting through the venom. "Mark," she hissed, her voice trembling. "Say something. Stop this. Don't let them." But I didn't. I met her gaze only once, long enough for her to see the calm in my eyes, the calm she had mistaken for weakness all those years. And then I looked away, back toward the people who now stood in applause, back toward Anna, whose hand rested firmly on mine. The orchestra resumed, not with the light chatter of background music, but with a triumphant swell that filled every corner of the hall. It felt orchestrated, though I knew it wasn't. It was simply the rhythm of the night changing, the tide turning. The melody rose, the strings soaring above the applause, blending into a single, powerful force. The gala was no longer Claire's stage. It wasn't even her father's. It belonged to Anna and, somehow, to me. In that moment, everything shifted. Claire had wanted to strip me down to nothing, to parade me as her fool. Instead, she had revealed herself as shallow and cruel, while I stood taller without saying a word. The silence I had carried through the evening had spoken louder than any protest. And as the music swelled, as Anna stood beside me with unwavering strength, Claire finally realized that the story she had written wasn't the one the world wanted to hear. The orchestra's triumphant music rolled over the crowd like a tide, and for the first time all evening, I let myself breathe. The hall was no longer a place where I sat in silence, enduring mockery while laughter circled me like vultures. It had transformed into something else entirely, a theater of reckoning where Claire's cruel script had collapsed in front of everyone. I stood in the middle of it, not because I had demanded attention, but because dignity had drawn it to me. And beside me, Anna's hand rested firmly on mine, her emerald gown glowing under the chandelier light, her presence radiating a kind of certainty that no one dared question. Claire's face told a story all its own. She was slumped in her chair, her shoulders drawn inward, her lips trembling as she muttered to no one in particular. The people who had once leaned close to laugh at her jokes now avoided her completely, shifting away as though her humiliation might stain them if they lingered too near. Even her closest friends glanced nervously around the hall, clearly calculating where loyalty now lay, and decided not to meet her eyes. She had built her entire life on the approval of others, and in one evening, it had slipped through her fingers. The CEO rose once again, his expression now carrying a faint smile. He raised a hand and the applause slowly quieted. When he spoke, his voice was steady, commanding, but softer than before, as if this moment required something beyond authority. Tonight we have witnessed not just celebration, but revelation. True character is never hidden for long. It reveals itself in the moments we least expect. My daughter has shown courage and vision, and the man she stands beside has shown dignity that cannot be shaken. That is what leadership, partnership, and strength are built on. His words were final, heavy with meaning, and no one dared to contradict him. Guests murmured their agreement, raising glasses toward us, their faces glowing with respect, admiration, even envy. It was as if the room itself had decided to rewrite its own memory, erasing the cruel laughter that had filled it earlier. People wanted to be aligned with what they now saw as power, and power had shifted in an instant. Claire's attempt to make me small had only made her disappear. Anna turned her gaze toward her father and smiled, the kind of smile that could steady storms. Then she looked at me, her eyes unwavering. In that silence, I understood that this wasn't just about embarrassment or revenge. It was about something deeper, a recognition of worth that no material thing could fake. She hadn't chosen me because I was wealthy, or because I held influence, or because of what I wore. She had chosen me because I had remained unbroken when every attempt was made to break me. And the weight of that choice was something I would never forget. Claire tried once more, her voice breaking through the murmurs like glass shattering. "You can't do this," she cried, her words trembling, desperate. "You don't know him, Anna. He's nobody. He's—" Her words caught in her throat, her voice shaking too much to continue. But it didn't matter. The hall erupted in applause again, louder than before, swallowing her cries whole. The more she fought to regain the stage, the more invisible she became. I turned my head slightly, meeting her eyes for the last time that evening. There was no anger in me, no need for sharp words or cruel retaliation, only silence. And in that silence, she finally understood. Her face twisted with realization, her eyes wet, her lips trembling as she lowered her gaze, defeated. She had lost not to me but to herself. The rest of the evening unfolded like a dream. Guests approached with handshakes and congratulations, some introducing themselves for the first time as though I had suddenly appeared from nowhere. Anna never let go of my arm, her presence steady, her chin lifted. We walked through the hall together as the music swelled once more, and I could feel the shift in the air. A shift Claire had never imagined, one she could never control. When the gala finally ended and the lights began to dim, I walked past her without a word. She didn't stop me, didn't reach out, didn't even try to salvage the mask she had worn for so long. She sat in silence, staring at the tablecloth, abandoned by the very crowd she had lived for. And in that moment, I knew her performance was over. As I stepped out into the cool night air, the city lights stretched wide and bright before me. The marble steps gleamed under the glow of street lamps, and for the first time in years, I felt taller, freer, stronger. Not because of wealth or status or the approval of strangers, but because I had held on to dignity when it mattered most. She mocked my suit. She tried to reduce me to nothing. But in the end, she lost her stage, her audience, and her name. And I realized something as Anna's hand tightened around mine. Steady and sure, silence, carried with strength, can turn ridicule into respect. And sometimes the sharpest weapon is not fury, not revenge, but simply refusing to be broken. If you stayed with me until the end of the story, don't forget to subscribe, hit the like button, and leave a comment with your thoughts. Because sometimes, the most unexpected twists remind us of what true strength really is.